Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space, for this new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. As per our season of special guests, today's episode will include the thoughts of three parties on whether to resurrect or rebury the 2011 anime Gundam Age. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic. With me, as always, is my co-host Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. Now, Jay, today's guest has not only assisted me in reigniting my love for all things mecha and kaiju, but he's also has shown me that not all those who own Xboxes are elitists. He's a good friend of mine that I know from automail school, and he's also a fellow automail mechanic. And today's episode, we have none other than the exuberant Ellis! Ah, that's the crowd applauding and greeting you, Ellis. Ah!
Sounds like crickets to me, but thanks for the introduction, Sam.
How are you doing, man? How are you doing? Is there anything that you want to describe yourself to the listeners for you a little bit?
Well, I am a Gundam fanatic. I've probably built close to 200 models in total over the course of since I was 7 to 31. But I also love a lot of genres of anime. And as you put it, I am a full-time automail mechanic. However, I am also bound by the government, which...
So you're a dog of the government? Is that what
I am a dog of the government. Of the military specifically.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Are you watching any anime at this moment, or does the government have you on a short leash?
Well, at the moment, I'm sort of not really watching anime right now, but I am reading a lot of different manga. So
okay,
yeah.
Any in particular?
Oh, Kaiju number 8, 100%.
Why did I not think about that? I was reading that too. It totally just like lost my mind. It's definitely a good one. It's definitely a good one. So now, Ellis, why don't you go ahead and give us your 9 anime? Now realize that with some of your picks, we may be judgmental.
Well, that's fully okay to be judgmental. As far as my number one anime of all time is Gundam, and as a franchise. But if I had to pick one, I would say IBO, Iron Blood Orphans, because
oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't realize what that stood for.
You didn't?
I'm sorry. No, I wrote it in my notes, and I was like, what is that? And if you Google it, it comes up with the International Bachelor's Program, and I was like, oh my gosh, what does IBO stand for? Why is it in my notes? And I was like, okay, never mind. But thank you, Ellis, for saying that.
One thing that kind of sets it apart for me than the other Gundam series is it's weird in that it's very low tech, and it's meant to be. Like, it's not supposed to be super futuristic as compared to some of the other series.
No. That's very true. Jay, have you had any exposure to Iron-Blooded Orphans?
A little bit, because of, it was, not to talk about the mecha genre in the 2000s or the 210s, but yeah, it kind of revitalized like what we think of like mecha nowadays. Well, I think it premiered back in like 2015, so wow. I don't even know what the newest Gundam is, but yeah, I've seen a couple of episodes. I really enjoy like the personality of the main character. I forget his name, but I love his character design because he's such a baller with his design that is kind of attractive in his mech and as well as his person. But yeah, I'm kind of familiar with it and how violent it is.
I think the main character's name was
Mikazuki Argus.
Yes, I'll just call him Argus. But Mikazuki, oh my goodness, I remember like because I think you and I we were watching Iron Blooded Orphans around the same time, Ellis, and we were saying how like he was like our lovable psychopath. Now, would you like to continue on with your list?
My second on the list is Samurai Champloo, and the reason for that is it felt to me like a mix of Rurouni Kenshin and Cowboy Bebop, which is a beautiful combination. And that's really just why I liked it. I thought that it had a good soundtrack to it. Hip hop and feudal Japan seem to go together.
It's like the two things that you don't know mix well, but mixes very, very well. But yeah, you were saying, Ellis.
Yeah, it goes together pretty well with that. There's another thing I like about it is it's a retelling of certain historical events with the main characters interjected. So it definitely piqued my interest because on top of being a professional automail tech, I'm an amateur history buff. So I definitely enjoyed that. Third on the list is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is required viewing for any anime fan in our field.
Yes.
And what I love about it is it's always in everybody's top 10 list. It seems it's always up there in the lists of favorite anime, and even people who don't traditionally like anime really enjoy Full Metal Alchemist. My wife got really, really into it and referred to it as the Edward and Alphonse show. Yeah, she put off watching the last 4 episodes for about 2 months because she didn't want it to end.
That's how you know when you love a series, is because you don't want it to finish, but you know, like, it's inevitable. But
right. My next pick is Zoids. New Century Zero to be specific, because I feel like that came out just after the Gundam Wing G Gundam boom that happened.
Yeah.
And that helped continue the revitalization of the mecha genre and just bringing mecha to the West. Because I remember a time where where there was almost like Walmart had like half an aisle devoted to Gundam and Zoid.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Now, Jay, I know that you're a big Zoids fan. Do you agree with Ellis's assertion?
Given that I put that Zoids on my top 10 mecha of all time list, I think so. But also,
no, I couldn't remember which one you liked.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah, but yeah, also, I'm not up to Ellis numbers of Gunpla or models, but yeah, I had basically Toys R Us, Walmart. I basically had like a good. I think I had around like 50 or 60 Zoids, and I remember when Toys R Us stopped, like basically when Hasbro stopped not publishing but releasing the Zoids to the West, is when like the Geobreaker was coming out, and I am still to this day butthurt. Like, that's like childhood trauma. That Geobreaker is my favorite Zoid, and I never got around to it. And I've seen it, plenty of times, and I make enough money to purchase it for myself. But it's kind of like one of those things of, I love it so much I don't want to have it. So that's where I am with it. But yeah, Zoids, man, it was my Gundam. Like, Gundam Wing was good, 00, G Gundam, all that. But Zoids is where my mech love kind of began.
Funny you should mention the Genobreaker. I am lovingly staring at one on my shelf right now.
Oh, the salt in the wound. All right, cool. You have to send me you're gonna have to send me a photo.
I'll have to get one.
Jay, that just means you have to pull the trigger now. You can't let somebody outdo you in your love for Zoids.
Oh, I thought you were suggesting I kill Ellis, but I was
that's not what I mean.
I was like, kind of extreme.
Yeah, man, I thought we were friends.
No,
you guys were friends.
We do not support violence in begetting Zoids as recompense here on this show. I just need to make that clear to the audience.
Well, if it does make you feel better, I got it right when I first started really getting into model building, and I did a crappy job on it.
That does make me feel better.
Okay.
I mean, you can always go back. You can go through it again and apply your more masterclass skills to it now, and probably shape it up proper.
I could, but I'm honestly, if I redo a Genobreaker, I'm gonna have to go for the Kota Bakiya one.
Ooh, good choice. Yes. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Escaflowne is a little bit special for me, as besides Gundam, because Escaflowne, I saw it on Fox Kids when I was like 7, and it it was weird. Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory was on Adult Swim at night, and Escaflowne was in the morning. So it would be like starting my day and ending my day with Mecha. It just sort of cemented me as a fan. Although it's more super robot in a way than Gundam is real robot for sure. And it like I said, I love it for that reason. And one thing that I like about the compilation movie is it didn't take anything away from the Escaflowne series, in my opinion, like some compilation movies do. But it added certain things, like making the mechs blood powered, and just things like that.
Oh yeah, made it what's the word? Made a cost happen rather than, oh, you get in a robot and it goes. They're just like, you get in a robot, but it comes at a cost, sort of like that monkey's paw type thing.
Exactly, which kind of ties into IBO as well. Rosaphon, the next one on my list. It reminds me of Evangelion, but what if Shinji ended up to be an angel? So
Ooh.
that sort of plays into that. I can definitely see where they took a lot of liberty with taking some elements from Evangelion into it. But at the same time, they kind of made it its own. That is one though that I will recommend skipping the manga on. The manga was just not fun for that.
Bad life choice.
Definitely bad life choice. It went way more into fan service than I would have expected.
You usually it's reverse. You would see that in the anime, not necessarily in the manga.
Right, and another reversal is the manga was written like 3 years after.
Oh, okay. So it was an anime original, and then they went in and did a manga adaptation. Okay.
The 7th one on my list is Bleach, and out of the big 3 between Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach, Bleach was my favorite out of the 3. So I'm actually super excited to see it coming back.
That 1,000-year war arc, baby.
I know that arc is going to be at least 3 years of anime, though.
Oh, it depends on which studio gets it. I can't remember if, because we haven't covered it too much, have we, Jay?
No, at the time it wasn't announced what studio is handling it, but if it is the same studio, I think it's Periot is the one that's responsible for the original Bleach publication or production. So if it returns to them, cool. But I would actually like to see another studio handle it personally, because with the 1,000-year war, it's like Squad Zero has to be handled carefully, and there's a lot of elements that like they need to have like some kind of selling points to Bleach coming back, because again, it's kind of a mixed bag right now about the popularity of the series. Like, does anyone want this? I mean, this has kind of been prompted because of the Kubo property. What was that? Burn the Witch?
Burn the Witch.
Yeah. So, to see, where the anime community is probably going to have to be on par with like, oh yeah, we're giving it the Studio Mappa, essentially. So something akin to that.
Yeah, they definitely have to go with a studio who's, extremely good at animation, because if they don't, it's not going to go anywhere. They need to have like One Punch Man first season levels of animation. The last 2 on the list are just, I feel like, classics that everybody pretty much enjoys, and that's Cowboy Bebop and Rurouni Kenshin. And they're kind of interchangeable on the list, truthfully, but they are, Cowboy Bebop is a masterpiece, and that is something that it transcends genres. And I have yet to find someone who has watched Cowboy Bebop and does not like it.
I had a bit of a pushback with Cowboy Bebop at first, just because of the episodic nature of the show. I'm not one for episodic shows, but it did win me over just because of the characters and their dynamic with one another.
That makes sense, and I can totally see that.
And just to mention about Rurouni Kenshin, yeah. Oh well, just that on the note of like live action adaptations, like Rurouni Kenshin has been like the one consistently for the past 5 years that is delivered on the live action front. So it's
Oh,
kind of a
definitely.
beloved property for that reason. And it was one of those on Toonami back in the day. So yeah, everyone has like a sweet spot for that, especially since it does the samurai genre right.
Exactly. One thing that I'm interested in is the anime series stopped before the final arc in the manga, and this last live action movie is going into that final arc. So it seems like the live action is maybe following the manga a little bit more faithfully.
Oh yeah, definitely. Have you had a chance to see it? Because it's on. It was on Netflix.
Yeah, I haven't had the chance to see the last one.
I'm not gonna lie. Like I queued it up because I know, like Jay said, like it. The movies they always deliver on the fight scenes. Even though the fight scenes are super anime, it seems realistic in how they do it. It's just like it's so weird. It's not like goofy amounts of action like in Fast and the Furious. It's like, oh no, like they're doing something that would only be seen in Bollywood. Whereas it's like definitely like straight up like kung fu stuff. You see people running on the walls and stuff like that, but they make it believable, even though it's totally not. You know?
Right. Right. That makes sense to me. Yeah. It definitely is a more, as far as like fighting styles and stuff like that, it's definitely feels like a more grounded series.
So now, Jay, after hearing Ellis's list of anime, do you are you satisfied with his list? Do you think we should grill him some more, or do you think he passes?
It definitely ages him in a like a very appropriate way. Like I can probably tell the age range that you are, Ellis. So I think that's a pretty good list. I mean, there is definitely a leaning towards like shonen genre. So when these were out on public broadcast, you can say like, oh yeah, so he was this age. So these are what stuck around for him in his mind. These are kind of what set up like the foothold of what good anime is. Yeah, Iron Blooded Orphans is the most recent one on your list, Ellis. So that's pretty awesome. And if you're not up to like seasonal anime, which I understand, because if there's like over 100 anime produced every single year, you can't really tune in, seasonally to watch it. So I think it's a great list. Nothing too scary. Full Metal Alchemist has some decent comedy in it, but it's all like good, solid action. A lot of good studio production in each of his choices. So yeah, I approve. Swipe right.
Yes, you get a swipe right from me as well, Ellis. And I definitely would be trying to look into Razafon, like you had mentioned, because I'm not familiar with that one. And with what you had said about the synopsis, it definitely does seem a little bit interesting. So I would want to definitely give it a shot. And I also do approve of your your love for Bleach and Zoids as well. It's been a minute since I've met anybody who had that combination. Gents, I know like we're here to talk a little bit about Gundam Age, but before we get into that, have either of you been exposed to it before? Now we could start with Jay here.
No, this is actually I was actually kind of pissed off when I first started watching this because I always in my memory it's I guess a Mandela effect, but I always thought Gundam Exia is from Gundam Age, but it's not. So when I got to seeing the Gundam in action for the series, I was like, that's not Exia. So I was kind of disappointed, but that was my own fault for misremembering it. But yeah, this is just in a time where I was not a fan of, or at least I wasn't watching Mecha at all, I guess. So Age kind of just went right over my head. I think the last one that I saw really was, I guess, Gundam Seed or Gundam Seed Destiny. So I just skipped right over Age.
Ellis, what about you?
I kind of skipped over it as well. Like Jay, I had just finished Gundam Seed Destiny, and I was a little salty about Destiny.
True.
So I kind of passed on Age. I had tried to watch it once before now, and had a little trouble doing that. I felt that because Age is weird that it's split up into 4 arcs, and I had a hard time with the first arc.
Oh no, that's fair. It's the first arc was kind of clunky, and they didn't really get like their it didn't really feel natural, or they didn't get their good story beats down until near the end of the show. But it's funny that both of you guys had said that like I I I, I just find it interesting because both of you had seen Seed and Seed Destiny, whereas I have seen neither. And so I ran across Gundam Age. I'm like, oh, it's a new Gundam show. How about that? So I just found it interesting, Ellis, because I know like when I first met you after our talks, like as much Gundam as you've been exposed to, you hadn't seen Age, or at the time when we had first met, you hadn't seen Age. I had seen it in its entirety, and I know with Jay and his uh, pseudo masochistic hate, yes, the love hate relationship with Mecha, the fact that he hadn't seen Gundam Age either. It would just be interesting to get both of your viewpoints on this anime franchise. We would get one avid fan who knows practically everything about Gundam and get a fresh new perspective on a Gundam property. And we also get a begrudgingly uh, love sick person in regards to Mecha and get to see like their true thoughts on it. And I have an overall good I said like I guess like an overall satisfied opinion with it, with the story. So it would just be interesting getting both of your perspective. So I can give a bit of a synopsis of it here, and then we can delve a little bit into the series. So essentially, the Gundam Age franchise. It starts off in the year AG 101. It's the year of the Advanced Generation calendar. And there is an unknown enemy, which they call the UE, that is known for attacking and destroying several colonies. It seems like at this time that a lot of humanity are in colonies in space. And there was one colony that was destroyed that became infamous in the universe known as the day that the angel fell. And the franchise follows this young person known as Flint Asano, who comes from a long generation of mobile suit construction or mobile suit designers. And he's essentially passed on this design for this mobile suit, which is known as a Gundam, which has a folklore-ish type view in their society. And we see him essentially making the Gundam suit as well as piloting it and fighting against this force known as the UE. And essentially, the franchise follows him as well as his family lineage in their conflicts against this unknown enemy. And essentially, the genre that this series falls under are action, mecha, sci-fi, and space. The rating is PG-13, and that's about it for the synopsis. And just before we go on, to let people know that there will be descriptions in the there will be time codes in the description to let you know when we're talking spoilers and non-spoilers. So the first will be talking non-spoilery, which will just be keeping to like the first few episodes to sort of give people an idea of what the franchise would be. And Jay, just want to start off with you. Was there anything like what sets apart the Gundam franchise from other mecha genres? Like what mainly makes a Gundam story?
Yeah, that's really hard. Well, not hard to quantify, but given that we did like a episode of the podcast on the history of the mecha genre, as well as going through like 7 hours of podcast of talking about Gundam Unicorn, is that there is like a lot of motifs that are just standard for a Gundam story, like the moralities of war, be it that everyone has a shade of gray, essentially, that there always has to be like a child soldier, essentially, I don't know if that's always true, but for at least the Gundam series, I've seen that all the pilots are some way directly affected by war efforts or tragedy brought about by like surprise or something that's just not expected at a time. So like a shocking event, as well as just a lot of tropes, I guess. That I mean, I guess you guys can speak a little bit more to the tropes, but just the ones that I really caught up on is that there's always some kind of tyranny that has to be fought, or that the Gundams are like weapons, and the pilots and the relationships with their Gundams. They have this like internal conflict of, am I a person or am I a weapon? Kind of like that. So those are like just the motifs that I see, but like that's what kind of sets Gundam apart for me, especially like when we go through all of our top 10 mechas. We're like, this is a Gundam story versus like Code Geass, which is kind of mecha. There's like Gurren Lagann and Gunbuster, and like we have a whole list of mecha anime that we talked about. But yeah, those are the like motifs that I see with the Gundam.
Ellis, what about you? In your opinion, what makes a Gundam story? What sets Gundam apart from the other mechas in the genre?
Well, first, it's like to kind of expound on what Jay said about everybody has a shade of gray. One thing that I absolutely love about Gundam that's in my mind sets it apart is there are antagonists and there's protagonists on in every faction. Like um like for the original Mobile Suit Gundam, the oppressive, Federation policies are certainly antagonistic toward the Xeon people, but the Zabi family is antagonistic toward the Earth people. And the protagonist for Xeon would be Char Aznable, and Armor Array for the Federation. And every individual pilot and everything has their own legitimate reasons to fight, and I like that. And it's definitely it's like that in real life. There's no side that's 100% right, and there's no side that's 100% wrong. And I definitely like that about that genre. And because Gundam, it's been going on for 40 years. It's almost a genre of its own, and that definitely like that. Another thing that makes a Gundam story is there's always a vastly experimental brand new suit of some sort that the protagonist somehow manages to stumble upon. With Age flips that on his head because he built it, but I definitely think that's sort of the way that it makes a Gundam story a Gundam story. That and loads of childhood drama.
Oh no, I definitely agree with both of you guys, and I would say just expand on what both of you had said too, because you mentioned how I guess like one thing that you can say, Allison, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Like what you said, how like there are antagonists and protagonists on both sides, is that the characters they try to make them more human, so make them more relatable, showing that a person that's in the enemy faction can be very relatable, which makes war as difficult and as horrible as it is. And the you also mentioned how there's always like a new piece of weaponry or piece of tech, such as a mobile suit, that's usually introduced in the beginning of the Gundam franchise. And I think that like what makes that like a focal point is because it's usually somebody that's new or somebody that's young that's piloting it and spearheading it, essentially showing that there is new hope for like a new perspective, sort of, in this old conflict. And I'm sure, like the one thing that I can think about, and Ellis, let me know if you find this true, but like whenever I'm dealing like with a patient or with a patient's device, sometimes like I can't see the forest through the trees, and so I need like another perspective, somebody to come in and sort of like take a look at it from another side point and be like, hey, you missed that there, or they just need to wear a sock or something like that, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's just like like especially like in war, like something that's so grudgy, and it's so easy to get lost in the sauce, whereas if you have somebody that's brand new, has a new perspective, can be naive, but sometimes like that newness is reinvigorating, and not everything is so doom and gloom either. Which it can kind of go into the soap opera ish field that Gundam is usually known for. I guess just to keep on going. So another thing that Jay and I have mentioned before is that like within the past 10 years, like there has been a vast decline in mecha. And Ellis, you had mentioned that with the Gundam is so big; it's been around for like 40 years. It's practically its own genre. And the studio Sunrise, they've released essentially a new property of Gundam at least once a year or every other year up until now. Do you believe that this is a benefit to the genre, or do you think that this is just Sunrise's attempt on trying to squeeze out as much money as they can before the mecha genre fizzles itself out?
I think it's a combination of both, truthfully, because Gundam for a long time now has basically been what's keeping the mecha genre alive. Because there really hasn't been many mecha series that's come along that has been put out as consistently as Gundam, and there's several. There's been, besides Gundam over the last few years, there hasn't really been many mecha series at all. I know Sunrise is about to come out with a new one whose name escapes me right now, but they're about to come out with a new property, and a couple others have, and we've had a few Hollywood adaptations that's brought mecha to like the West as far as, and has been heavily influenced by mecha anime like Pacific Rim. But as a genre, Gundam's really, in my opinion, been keeping mecha alive lately. But it's also doing new things. It's not just, it's also revitalizing it. It's not just, you know, trying to squeeze as much money into it. It's also bringing new fans into the genre. It's interesting because I've noticed, at least, it's a pattern. It feels like where mecha will sort of, decline. There'll be no huge mecha booms. Gundam will put a series out that gets massive, um, like IBO, or even further back, about 10 years before that, W.o.W. And when those came out, it was a shot in the arm for the mecha genre. And right now, there's just based on, you know right now, as far as like Gunpla as a hobby goes, which, mecha models, but we're in a boom right now because there's a lot, and demand is overwhelming supply.
A little bit of that mecha, or at least the Gunpla boom, is because of the Gunpla builders anime. Like it, it
Exactly.
was,
Exactly.
yeah. So like, are you saying like that's part of the one of the newer things that Gundam is using to add to the mecha genre, or because you could say that that's just a cash grab right there.
You could, but and that could also be, it definitely could be a cash grab, but um, we've also had a renewed interest in, like, for example, um, Robotech and Macross has been, in the West, has been gridlocked by, a lawsuit for one of the studios for the better part of 30 years now, and that's finally getting resolved. And one of the reasons it's been resolved is there's been demand, for to see that those series come to the West. And there's, it's sort of interesting because if Gundam had not been consistent in coming out with something and having having as popularity as it did, and with every Gundam, I guess I'm going to call it a Gundam boom, but every Gundam boom, like W.o.W, IBO, this last build series, what happens is people watch those and then go back and watch the older stuff, and to try to get more, learn more about it.
To
So
to sort of see what they missed, to see if there was anything good.
right, And
Oh.
I mean, like Code Geass is on Netflix now, so and there's and several in the original Gundam compilation movies are on Netflix now too. So there's definitely an interest in even things as far back as the 70s.
No. That's very interesting. I didn't realize that Macross was, or at least like I think I heard about Macross having a hard time coming to the States because of legal issues. Like they had combined one or two more shows, but um, I'm trying to think because Jay, you had mentioned to me some time ago there was a Macross series that sort of like blended with idol culture. Is that is that the series that fans is trying to bring over here, or is it another Macross franchise that people are trying to see?
No, I mean it's always been the case. Like Ellis mentioned, that it's always been in this legal dispute. Is why like a lot of the video games never came over here when the hype was around like PS1 and PS2 era. That a lot of those Macross games were a lot or had a lot of popularity in Japan, but they never got ported over for that reason. But yeah, that's the reason why I took away my suggestion of covering Frontier because it's not readily available, and we want to make sure that whatever we're talking about is available to be watched and to be appreciated properly. You never want to go through illegal websites, even though a lot of the licensing agreements and a lot of the legal holdups do keep a lot of series behind bars. I mean, that's what went on with Netflix, and when certain properties went into quote unquote Netflix jail or anime jail because of that reason. Because Netflix basically was trying to work around these legal agreements because they were so huge that they were like forcing the issue, and then
Hmm.
that's how you know the anime jail got broken up. And I think Netflix is one of those pushers in the industry because they're doing the live live action adaptation this year or next year, part of the 100th year project that they're doing. Because that was
Oh
part of
yeah,
the
Gundam.
Hathaway and the previous installment. But yeah, I agree with what Hella said. Yeah, so it is a very interesting case of now is the time that Mecha's blowing up. And I don't want to pat Michael Bay on the shoulder, but it does feel like something of a product of his dominance in, the film industry for the past, what, decade, I guess, bringing Transformers to the West. And that's kind of been in a hole. And it's something that can appeal to Chinese markets if you bring like the Macross or I guess actually any Gundam story technically is transferable to like American audiences. So it's an interesting case that Mecha's probably going to blow up in the next 5 years.
I kind of agree with that, and I'm also going to give kudos to Del Toro because of Pacific Rim, because he Pacific Rim started out with him trying to do a live action Evangelion project.
Oh, it was Evangelion.
Yep. As a matter of fact, the Jaegers, and the Jaegers are 80 meters, which is a throwback to the Avas because they are 80 meters too. So they kept everything in the same scale as like what an Ava would see.
Oh, okay. I was wondering why they were so big. That sort of makes sense now. Because I knew that he had a love for Mecha, but I didn't know that it was Evangelion in particular.
He was trying to, like I said, he was trying to do a live action Evangelion movie. He just couldn't get the studio in Japan's backing for it.
Now that I think about it, thinking back on Del Toro's filmography, because I've seen The Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth, that is totally up his alley. To see some kid's mind get broken because his dad wants him to pilot a giant robot, I feel like he would do very well with an Evangelion movie. On to the anime at hand, Gundam Age. So, as you had mentioned earlier, Ellis, with most other Gundam franchises, it's usually like a new piece of equipment or new mobile suit and that's either inherited or stolen by this new person, the new pilot. Whereas in Gundam Age, we see the main character sort of build this mobile suit, and like the first few episodes, it's at least like for me, it parallels the first Gundam series. It feels very, very reminiscent. And as you said, with Gundam trying to bring in new fans, so essentially, uh, you would think that they would want to bring in homages or tropes from the other series or franchises that they have made into that point to try to sort of feed into their new fans so that they can go back and they can enjoy the other older shows. But do you feel as though that? Oh, did you feel the same thing when watching the first few episodes of Gundam Age? Did you see a parallel? Do you think it was an homage, or do you think that it was like what the new Star Wars was doing in killing, or at least blowing up the Death Star for like a third time? It's like, okay, we get it. It's the same story. We don't need this again.
I don't know. I don't want to say it's blowing up the Death Star a third time, but there's definitely parallels that are intentional. Because in the beginning, the Earth Federation in the first Gundam had just the Gundam, no other mobile suits, just the Gundam and the gun tank and the gun cannon, and that was it. And they were struggling to meet the technological advantage that Xeon had, and I feel that is the same thing going on in Age, because the UE has a lot of mobile suits that are way more advanced than the mobile suits that Earth has. And the mobile suits that Earth had, one thing in the beginning that really was interesting to me is the Earth mobile suits could not damage the UE at all, with which, at least in the first Mobile Suit Gundam in 1979, uh, the tanks, the airplanes, the cannons on the battleships, all of that could overwhelm a Zaku's armor and destroy it. But with Age, the UE came in and were basically untouchable until the Gundam showed up.
So like you were saying, it was like it's just like this overwhelming force in like a group of two or three in Gundam Age. Whereas you can have like one mobile suit be overpowered in the OG Gundam, but the in that case it's just trying to pin that particular suit down so that you can overwhelm it with firepower.
Oh, definitely. And like in Gundam Igloo, which it's a side story to what's happening during the 1 Year War. You see several instances of Zaku's and mobile suits getting destroyed by just conventional tanks.
So you see their situation being dire, but not unwinnable. Whereas in Gundam Age, it's just like
It's
it
unwinnable.
yeah, it's unwinnable. It's only a matter of time before they're overrun.
Exactly. And that is something that um, it Gundam Age brought. One thing that they brought about for me is it took it took an ex machina to a whole new level for me with the Age system, because in the first couple episodes, if you meet an enemy that you can't do anything about, the 3D printer of fate spits out the answer.
Pretty much. I would say like that was and it's interesting because this show, I want to say like it came out during the big boom when 3D printer was starting to gain traction, and I think like that's why it sort of resonated so much at the time. And whereas like as you said, like it you basically have this 3D printer that can make or can update your suit in real time. So, as long as you can hold out, you can get that new resupply and you can turn the tide of battle. And I definitely remember watching it. It was like just how broken that it can be. But Jay, do you have any thoughts on the opening for the show? Did you see any parallels to some of the other Gundam franchises that you've seen?
I didn't watch the original Gundam, and I was like, while Ellis, you were talking, I was like, I had an epiphany, like, oh, the original Gundam is 0079. I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, it is the thing, like, when you're watching the first episode, you actually have this weird scene of it got me to Attack on Titan, where Aaron's mom is pinned under a house and he has to watch her die too, and then a giant creature is in the background. I'm like, oh, okay. That's my parallel that I took away from it. But of the first 3 episodes,
Attack on Titan in space.
yes, and then the first 3 episodes are pretty decent. They definitely pass the 3-episode tests of like establishing the antagonist or the there is a mysterious, not talking about spoilers yet, but in the 3rd episode it introduces like, you know, the opposing Gundam or opposing mobile suit that, you know, our main character is going to go against, sets up the stakes of the world, does a pretty good introduction of the main character, and feels very slice of life at times in like the first episode specifically. And I was like, again, like very thrown off that this gave me a lot of, I forgot what the series is called, but it came out years later. Like, is it Build Fighters, or it was Sunrise's attempt of like catering to like the younger demographic? Or
Oh, are you talking about like SD when they're super kawaii?
Oh yeah, the chibis, yeah, like the chibi versions of Gundam series, yeah. But I think there is a Gun Plus series.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about SD Gundam.
So, like, when you were speaking earlier, Sam, about the question about, like, what makes a Gundam series, this is, like, one of the few Gundam series I was like, this is the least Gundam series I've seen. And I've seen maybe, 5 or 7 series in total. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the 12th installment, if I'm counting correctly. And I was, like, revisiting all of the Gundam series I've seen, and there's like some really weird ones. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot War in Pocket is a Gundam series, and still bothers me to this day. It's not War in the Pocket, it's just War in Pocket. But anyways, yeah, so 3 episodes. I didn't see any parallels because I've never seen the original series, but it does pass the 3-episode test for me.
Okay, so it passed the 3-episode test for you, and if you had a choice, would you have continued, or it like you said, it just passed? So like it gave you the story and gave you enough to make your own decision on whether or not you wanted to keep going.
So I did say it does pass the 3-episode test, but that immediately falls flat because Ellis mentioned this earlier, but in the total run of the series is 49 episodes. Those 49 episodes are split between 4 arcs, and it's one season, 49 episodes, but 4 arcs, because I think you mentioned it in the opening, Sam, that there's 3 generations of this family.
Yes.
Is it Asuno family?
Yes, the Asuno family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that it's following different characters in that family's lineage, like you said, and the 3 episodes only work for the first 13 episodes or first 12 episodes, because that's where Flint, the first main character, is the protagonist technically. Mm-hmm. So you do have to do the 3-episode test again when you get to the second arc of the story, which I think the second part is the best arc, but we can get to that later.
So then, Ellis, what did you think about that? Do you do you agree with Jay in that the first 3 episodes only works for like a certain part of the show?
I do, but if I'm going to be honest, like for the first arc, it almost fails the 3-episode test for me. I did not like the main character at all. Like Flit, I do not like Flit. I had the first 12 episodes I had to power through, because I felt like he's so overwhelmed with wanting to kill every one of the UE. Like, he says it on numerous occasions. He's going to be the savior of humanity, and he's going to kill all the UE. Like, he's genocidal. I just didn't like him.
You know, Ellis, I agree with you, but that's why I did like it, so I'm glad you said that, because I was like, that is such an interesting way to take, so, like, it feels like the show is supposed to be geared towards a younger audience, so maybe not your typical, quote, typical Gundam fan, but I like that this main character is not, like, edgelord about it, but he's like, I saw my mother die in front of me, and my solution to the problem is to kill everyone on the other side. And I was like, that's such an interesting take for a Gundam protagonist to, like, take that stance when, like, every other Gundam series I've seen is like, they don't know what to do with themselves. They're kind of apathetic. But this guy is like, I'm building this weapon of mass destruction to kill every single person that, we'll find out who the UE is, but to kill all these other beings, essentially.
Exactly. And what's funny is Flit is essentially Eren Yeager. He is the guy from Attack on Titan. That they're the same person basically. But it's funny. Every reason I hate Flit is the reasons I love Eren.
Okay, true. Yeah.
and
you're like, you can't have Eren in my Gundam.
Exactly. But he just doesn't feel, I don't know. To me, it just doesn't feel like he fits. He fits in his own universe. I definitely liked Wolf better.
Oh my gosh, yes. So yeah, we'll talk about him in a bit.
No. So we'll be going on to that, right? Just want to, because we're going to be going into spoiler territory right now. Just wanted to sort of just tell the audience, like, we're going to be doing the time codes again. Like, we just talked about pre-spoilers. Now we're going into spoiler territory. And Ellis, you mentioned that Wolf was your favorite character, or you liked him more.
I definitely liked him more in the. He was probably my favorite in the first arc.
I guess because my next question for you too was going to be, who was your favorite character? And I guess I should preface this with, because I was going to say like favorite character overall, but as both of you had said, we're going through like 3 different generations, is like 3 different arcs. So I guess, like, do we want to do a favorite character for each generation, or just like an overall favorite character?
Overall is good.
Okay, so then Ellis, we'll start with you, right? So, like, who would you say is your overall favorite character? Since you're sipping on the haterade for Flint right here.
I'm bathing in it, but his son Osamu is my absolute favorite character in the series.
Why is that? Are we talking about when he first shows up, or are we talking about third? No, because you didn't see the 3rd generation much, did you?
I did not. I didn't watch it, but I totally spoiled it for myself.
Okay.
So I definitely, I'm up to date.
Okay, yeah. So you know what happens, and that's really interesting. But which iteration of Asimo is your favorite?
I like him overall, like overarching.
Okay.
Because I don't know. How spoilery can we get into reasons why I like him better?
We're in spoiler territory now.
Okay. He doesn't have any new type space magic. He's not an X rounder. He's a normal human, and he's always at a disadvantage because he doesn't have any special abilities. And what he did is he just honed his skills to the point where he can, go toe to toe and even mop the floor with some of these special people.
Yeah, like he put in the work at the gym. Like and I would say like he had a good mentor too to allow him to hone his skills. And
exactly. And Wolf, that was Wolf. Wolf was his mentor. And Wolf was the same way in a sense, because he wasn't, he was just a normal guy who honed his skills. And that, it wasn't any, a hallmark of Gundam is main character gets into the cockpit, main character unlocks super awesome mental abilities. And in this, he doesn't have that. I mean, he has extremely low aptitude for the they call it X rounder, the X rounder abilities.
So then, like you said, he does become more I forget what the word is, but he does become more likable because he had to work to get to what he needed. It's not like it was plot space magic that allowed him to do what he needed to do. So Jay, who was your favorite character?
I feel really bad now because I don't want to say Asumu either, but it does very much work in the Gundam franchise about how does the protagonist and the antagonist work. So that's why I really love, to give a separate reason from what Ellis just said, but Asumu's antagonist, rival, is it Zahart?
Yeah.
Yeah, Zahart.
Yeah, and dude, this guy, what shonens try to do is like they always try to give the opposite force kind of like a better appeal because they're like, oh, young boys like to be the bad boys, and like the bad guy is the cool guy essentially. But try to still teach the moral lesson that good always wins. But Zahar and Asamu's relationship or their rivalry, how they fight, is so great in the series. And again, talking about when he comes back in part 3 as Captain Ash, I believe.
Yes,
Right.
the
Is
space
that
pirate.
yeah, he's
Space
like
Pirate.
he's Space Pirate Dad, and I was like, I was so keen into that because I think is it Kyo, the grandson?
Yep, it's Kyo. It's
Yeah.
Kyo.
Sucks so hard.
Oh god, yes.
When his dad comes back, you're like, Ellis, we still have this talk about we should do a third category of when we're talking about animes, should it be resurrected, reburied, or rewritten? But this is like so part of that rewrite that I want to talk about is that Captain Ash is so breath of relief, I guess, in the third arc because he goes missing, becomes a space pirate captain, and then comes back to fulfill his duty as my father's son. And there's always this new dynamic that I've never seen really before in Gundam is that this series deals with like the sins of your father, and that's what Flint sucks so much, and that he passes that on to his children essentially is that yes, this Gundam is special, yes, I want to be the savior of the world, and you as my children need to be saviors as well essentially. Asamu kind of takes that in a very different direction where Kido is like a pacifist and he's like one of those like, oh, I don't want to kill anybody, but I will let people die kind of mentality when it comes to Gundam pilots.
Yeah.
But yeah, Asamu just stands so starkly versus the other two that you have to love him. And then his fighting style against Zahar is so different from how Flint or Kyo would have dealt with him. It was like this is like the kind of bromance that you want to see in Gundam.
It's sort of funny because it's like I'm just like a stark difference between you two because Asimo is your favorite, but Flint is my favorite. And but let me finish, right? So like taking in the series as a whole, when I was watching it at first, I hated Asimo's character, especially when he was in.
Oh, someone's about to get kicked from the podcast.
Oh yeah.
Give me a second, okay? Give me a second, right? This is young dumb Sam, okay?
Swing the hammer.
He didn't know no better. But when the third act came about, like I really did appreciate the growth that his character had. And going back and rewatching it up to this point, I realized that Asimo was essentially he was doing his best to be the perfect son that Flint had tried to make him become, right? Whereas like there were times when he found out that he didn't have the aptitude for the X rounder, right? To be an X rounder. He goes to his dad trying to he gets a message from Flint, and you would think that it's going to be something that's like uplifting or something, but it's not. It's just like it's essentially Flint saying, "Don't worry, Asimo, you're gonna do great. Do you know why? Because my blood runs through your veins." It's still on Flint. It's not about Asimo and his character, and like one thing that I didn't really get when I first watched it was, essentially like this this impossible standard that Asimo was always trying to reach. And like in watching it back now, I'm seeing, Wolf was trying to do his best to show Asimo that he has to be the best person that he can be. He doesn't need to be his dad. He doesn't need to be anybody else, but be the best person that he can be. But all that being said, that's sort of why I like Flint when he's Grandpa Flint, because he is wiser, and I feel as though, from what I remember in the third season that I've seen, it seems like he has learned a little bit of his mistakes from what he's done in parenting wise with Asimo, and is trying to do a lot better with Kyo. Like you can tell like his relationship with Kyo is so much better, so much more healthier, despite the fact that he basically groomed Kyo to be a death wielding machine. Despite that, like you can tell like it's coming from a loving place. It's not coming from a place of duty and due diligence like how he was doing with Asimo when Asimo was growing up. And for like that final father son resolution, Flint was at a point was at a part or he had grown to the point to where Asimo it seemed like and Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I hadn't rewatched this part, but he had grown to the point to where they could rebuild a future together and try to fix their broken family to that point. And I think that's why like Grandpa Flint in particular is my favorite character. Did you was I correct in saying what I said, Jay?
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking about how that wraps up with the 48th and 49th episode because I don't really see that what you just said, Sam. So I was like replaying it in my head because there is a struggle that, you know, there's a point of no turning back that Flint makes, and it's Kyo that kind of nudges him in the right direction. And of course, after you see, you know, your son goes missing, like you feel responsible, you have to raise your grandson to be a certain way. That of course that changes your character essentially, but there was still hatred enough at the end of the series to for Flint to still pause at the consideration of, do I still let destruction come to the EU because I still want vengeance for my mother, or do I forge a path forwards? So again, it's more of the Aaron Yeager thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's does feel too heavy-handed because I think that's the problem with the story overall. But we'll get to that later on. But the story of pacing is that maybe if Kyo wasn't even in the picture, that if more time was given to Old Man Flint and the space adventures of Captain Ash, it was like maybe we would play better at the end. Is that we see Grandpa Flint growing in that direction, but how it wraps up so quickly, I don't really see that. So yes, he does make the right choice, but it's also like hesitant. So did he really change, or did the story demand him to change?
Oh, that's a good question. But I want to say that it was probably him. And I only say this mainly because of interacting with my own grandparents, right? Because, like, for some reason, even if, like, my parents were to say something to my grandparents are really against it. But like for some reason, if it comes from me, if I basically say the same thing, they're more open to it. Like they're more open to change. So like the fact that Kyo was a deciding factor, it makes more sense to me because I've experienced that personally. So that's why I would lean towards more it's the character, not necessarily the story. But aside from taking my experience out of there, like it does seem like it would be more of a story driven change than a character driven one.
I kind of have to agree with that because, Gundam as a franchise is not afraid to go to homicidal, genocidal acts. Like, we've had colony drops, we've had colonies get nerve gassed, we've had nuclear weapons used, we've had, giant space lasers. They're not afraid to do horrific acts.
Venting a colony into space.
Yeah. So, him not, him doing something to kill all the UE, that's par for the course for Gundam. They'll do that in a heartbeat. But so I definitely think it was more of a character thing.
So then, we're talking about monumental moments like within the franchise. Is there a particular moment that had stood out to you in the Gundam in Gundam Age, Ellis, and what you've seen?
Yeah, it did, and it kind of harkens back to what we were talking about earlier with when Asimo got his results back, and he is not an X rounder. What shaped him for the rest of the series was, after that message that Flit, sent him, which is weird that he sent him a message because they were in the same place. He could have just came to him to talk. But instead he sent a message. And his utter disregard for Asimo from that point on. Anything Asimo said, Flit was against it. He stonewalled Asimo at every turn. Even in things that I felt that younger Flit would have done. Like there's a scene where Asimo wants to evacuate the civilians from a city before they go fight the UE, and Flit's like, nope, go ahead, fight them. And like younger Flit would have got all the humans out first. Yeah, and that was sort of the defining point for me, and that was, showing how far what up until that point, the main pro tag had fallen. And that was sort of the defining point for me, because it was like, how far can you fall?
And it's sort of funny too, because you already don't like him, so it's like, oh great,
Yeah.
now another reason for me not to like you.
Yeah. It's like, go ahead and confirm how I feel about you.
Oh man, what about you, Jay? Was there a particular scene that had jumped out to you, that stuck with you after watching Gundam Age?
Yes, it goes into Arc 3, the Kyo arc, and it's just, again, because I was mistaken about thinking the Exia was from this series, it's when the FX appears for the first time.
Yeah, it's the FX.
Yeah, the FX appears, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the moment I've been waiting for. And the reveal, like, that's something that Gundam does, like, spectacularly when it comes to the reveal of Gundam, and something that Ellis brought up is about how experimental that some of these technologies that they introduce into the series is. And this is like one of those moments that every generation, I think we haven't mentioned this yet, but every generation they build upon that base model that Flint's mom handed him. So he built the original Age 1. Age 2 comes out with Asemu. Age 3 come out with Kyo. And then you get to the FX, and we haven't even talked about like the amazing mech designs. But when the FX finally shows up, and like I'm anticipating it, I'm binging the series, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going to be the next model? Because I'm coming to the end of the series. So what is going to be the ultimate version of this Gundam going to look like? And when it's revealed, I think it's like episode 34. It's pretty far into it, but it is like just spectacular how it comes out.
No. That's good, and I'm glad they had mentioned the mobile suit designs, because what was Jay? We can start out with you. What was your favorite mobile suit throughout the franchise? Because as you said, like the designs are very unique, and the reveals are very well done in this show.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my gosh, this is hard. This is really hard actually, because I haven't remembered like this variety of different Gundams since like Gundam Wing. And I was like going back to what I love so much about the movie Endless Watts is it G Bounder, the one that Wolf pilots?
In the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, is that a Tall Geese? Not clone, but like, is that an homage to Tall Geese? And I was like, I love when they have that kind of slick design, like knights in shining armor, essentially. When he dual wields like beam sabers, I guess, is just so like, it's one of those models that I can see like, oh, if I ever get into Gunpla again, that's like one of those models that goes at the top of my list, because I love how it looks. But also just because Zahar is like my secondary favorite character. Like is it
Legilis? Something
Legilis,
like that, yeah.
Thank you, Legilis, yeah, thank you. So those two are like standouts for me because of how slick they are, because they very much contrast the Age 1, which looks like a plastic toy Power Ranger thing. And like, but again, because like I think over the course of the whole series, it's like from the first year that it begins when his mom dies to the conflict resolving itself is like 70 years, I think. But yeah, for all those iterations of the Gundam Age, for it to advance that so far, with even the opposition advancing kind of in the same pace, like step for step, that I very much enjoyed that part of it.
Ellis, what about you? Was there a particular mobile suit that had stood out to you?
Oh, definitely. But it's also Zahart's, but it's the Giralga, the one he had just before the Legolas. I like how it's so much different than what we normally see in a Gundam series. The way it's designed. I like uh but it's odd because it's like it's a progression of moving toward a Gundam design for the can I go ahead and call them vegans?
Yeah,
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 for
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah. You,
yeah.
you can, you can.
It's totally it's totally a progression for the vegans because you can see they're going toward a Gundam design, but they're not quite there yet. And then when he activates X rounder mode, the shoulder spikes, it gets more spiky and everything. And it's interesting because it's like, oh, you're going toward a Gundam design, and then when he goes X rounder mode, it takes a step back and it looks more bestial. So I definitely liked that design the best.
I would say that also goes in line with their sort of motif because, as you had mentioned, with the space powers, the quote unquote new type equivalent, right, that they try to have in most of the Gundam franchises. The one that was different in Gundam Age, whereas in all the other iterations of Gundam, they try to make the new type the evolutionary progression for the common man. Whereas in Age, they the main leader in the Vegan forces, he deems the X Rounders to be inferior, saying that they're more bestial in nature. So the fact that the suit would become more animalistic when the X round is inactive, or when it's activated. It sort of makes sense in what they're trying to portray in terms of X rounders and making them, I guess, quote unquote, subhuman.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I like that. I like that. That puts it very well.
But as far as me, because I would have to say like it when Jay was saying how all the unique uh, Gundam or mobile suits that happened in Age, it made me realize just how I was entrapped by this series because I not only had gotten a master grade version of the Gundam Age Titus, but I also had gotten a high grade version of the Gundam Age 3 Fortress, the iteration of Kyo's mobile suit when it's retrofitted so that it can maneuver well on Earth. I just really like the designs of those two, and I would say Titus is more of my favorite just because it basically looks like the robot version of the Hulk, and all of his special abilities are just ground and pound type stuff. But as I'm going through the show again, like I realize my love for those two mobile suits, but I also begin to have an appreciation for Wolf's G Bouncer, and I am kind of remiss that I never had gotten a Gunpla model kit for Asimo's Darkhound, just because I think, and Ellis, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Darkhound, it seems to be a callback for Gundam Crossbones.
It is the whole space pirate motif is 100%, you know, a callback to that. But it's because both of like the crossbones have the lances, like the Dark Hand does. They have the anchor shots, you know, where they have a grappling hook that launches out and grabs things. They have the flash bombs. I mean, it's almost 100%. It's like if you put Dark Hound in a group of crossbones and they were the same height, it would you wouldn't be able to tell.
So that makes sense. And I guess like what one thing that I wanted to mention because when we were talking about favorite moments earlier, I didn't get a chance to mention mine because it's in tied with my favorite line of the franchise. And so like essentially like my favorite moments of Gundam Age is when I don't know if you guys remember this character, but his name was Commander Bruiser. It was the commander in the first generation that basically sacrificed himself so that the colony can escape. And it was just like his last lines to Flint before he ends up dying. To me, it was sort of like a good homage and reference to both Spock as well as Uncle Ben's famous quote. Basically, Bruiser had said the following: "You should be saving the lives of the many rather than just the one. Now that you have power, you have responsibilities that come with it." And I was just like geeking out as he was saying it. I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, I love this guy, even though he looks like the Doctor from Astro Boy. He's just like, he's now. This was now my favorite death. But was there a particular line that had jumped out to you guys in this series?
Yeah, Wolf's speech to Osimo about being not being an X rounder but being a super pilot. Because it he talks, Osimo's at his lowest point about how, he's not an X rounder, and he's actually, his dad actually tossed him in the brig. Like, he's in jail.
Mhm.
He's down on himself, and Wolf is talking about how you don't have. Wolf is telling him that you don't have to be an X rounder to be the best version of yourself and to be an exceptional pilot, because and he's like, look at me, I'm not an X rounder, and yet I just defeated one in battle. So because in the battle before that, Wolf took out an X rounder pilot,
Yeah.
using just pure skill.
Hmm.
So he was telling him, look, I'm not an X rounder, and I can take these guys out. You can achieve it. You don't have to be what your dad expects you or wants you to be.
And that's very hard to do too, because they're basically like Spider-Man out there in space that can like dodge your attacks and your bullets. So like it definitely is a testament to the hard work that both Wolf and Osimo had done. But like you said, it's also words of encouragement because he is talking to Osimo and what Osimo can do, not necessarily what Osimo's worth is because of who his father is, but he's worth like his worth is basically intrinsic to who he is, not because of who he belongs to, so to speak.
Right, and I would even argue that, over the course of the series, Osimo eventually is the best pilot out of the three.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Like when he's in the Dark Hound, oh my goodness, dude, you can't touch the man. You can't touch him. But Jay, what was there a particular line or a particular moment of dialogue that or character interaction that jumped out to you?
Just in terms of I talked about it a little bit before about how I
Hmm.
feel like it does well now that Ellis brought it up, but the idea of when Flint changes his mind at the end of choosing not to genocide the EU people at the end, and that
Hmm.
Keto has that moment of he has his grand soapbox moment of that the past essentially is the past. So maybe it's placating to like past storytelling tropes of like you have to let things go, Dad, essentially, because again, like you have to think, and you're thinking of this like three generational story that his mother, Flint's mother, gave him the tool to fight back, essentially, and then Flint's son, or for like so many years, he thought he essentially killed his son because he passed on the Gundam to his son, and then his son died. So when you get to the end, where that Hito is explaining that all this can end peacefully, or is that your own trauma doesn't justify such a gruesome act, and like yes, like these Gundam pilots can veer into that idea of like pacifism in war, but I do like how it is worded in that instance of not grandstanding so much, but saying like Dad, this is what you went through. This is what you made your son go through. This is what I went through. There are points that you have to say enough is enough. And I just like that in a story that we see from these young people, or these young boys in war. And now that I'm thinking about it too, like it has like the Mega Man aesthetic kind of works with that as well. Is that Mega Man is a post-apocalyptic world as well, but in this, like, I buy it when Kito does do that soapbox speech at the end, because yes, he goes from like, or his grandfather goes from genocidal maniac to I don't want to kill anybody, but that is what all Gundam stories do kind of lean into, is that there is an end to war. So something that you mentioned before, Sam, is that with the new generations, there's a new opportunity or new perspective to see war through, or to put the context through a different lens. So I kind of buy it at the end. I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I'll clap for this. The speech in Independence Day kind of way. So I do like the speech at the end, even though it kind of does wrap up abruptly. It does feel like the 49 episodes would have served better if there was like maybe 3 or 4 more episodes after it.
Talking a little bit about like the climax and like of the show, and how the show tries to walk through each of these generations, basically showing how the hurt is propagated through generations of war, things like that. Do you think that Gundam Age's story adds anything to the mythos that is Gundam, or do you think that it's just the same war is bad, people are people, people get hurt type stuff?
Actually, I want to hear from Ellis first, because I'm going to say something. No, it's just like really ignorant to say like, yeah, all Gundam stories are the same because they're Gundam stories. But talking about the mythos, I think this is like one of those instances of what Disney didn't do with Star Wars. I mean, I want to bring that up again, something else, but
Okay.
that the expanded universe for Star Wars is so multi-dimensional, multifaceted, that you can take the story literally in any direction. And even with the novel series that came out, wow, 5 years ago, I guess, Lost Stars. But you can do a story of like a janitor on a Imperial Star Destroyer, or you can talk about like a shop owner on a destroyed moon. And same thing with like Gundam Age, is that telling the story through multiple generations does add to the appeal of a Gundam story. I don't know if it adds anything dimensionally to the mythos, because if we're talking about that whole X rounder kind of dynamic, that's the same thing as was it Nerve?
No, new type.
New type, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
the same thing in different clothing, essentially. But I do like it in the way of seeing the progression of Gundams from folklore, essentially, to adapting society around it.
No, that's a fair point. And Ellis, what are your thoughts?
I think that it sort of adds to the mythos in that you see how the warfare affects one family generationally. And the reason I think about that is, and it also does a better job of kind of filling in the in between times that some Gundam does, because uh, for example, the original Gundam and Gundam Zeta was the original was 0090, 0079, and I forget which one Zeta is. I think it was 85, but or 87 rather. But what it was is, I'm not certain on the date. Sorry, but what the difference is, you're not 100% sure what happened in between times. Like, you don't see the outcome of the war. Like, it says, "Oh, the war's over," and then years later it picks back up again. It's like, well, what happened to?
No. I was just gonna say, like, it sort of reminds me of because when I was first watching Gundam Age, I don't know. I guess because I was still like essentially just using it like just watching it casually and not watching it seriously. But when they, because at first when they had introduced the UE, I I sort of drank the Kool-Aid and thinking that, they were aliens, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this is the first Gundam where they're fighting they're fighting aliens. They're not fighting other people. This is different, right?" But then, you end up
Psych.
realizing, yeah, like the bait and switch. And then like going back and watching it, like they do talk about um the sickness that the Vegans had dealt with in the first generation, but they don't revisit it until Kyo's generation, the third generation. And I remember that being very prominent because I think Kyo, he had a Benager moment where he's essentially, I can't remember if he was captured by the Vegan or something happened to where he was behind enemy lines and he was over there with Vegans in their colonies, and he was able to see what they had experienced, and so you were able to see like their side of the war. And I don't know why I linked this to your thought, Ellis, about seeing in the downtime. Well, I guess like it's sort of like that everyday life type thing. Whereas in the Vegans, like you got a glimpse of like how they were living, but then trying to link it back to your thought, you got to see Asimo in the sense of when he was in school, them trying to deal with the fallout. Well, not necessarily the fallout, but like the sort of like rebranding and the reorganization of the Federation, right? And them still trying to vet out who's part of the UE and who's not. And it's sort of like it. I'm kind of mad now thinking about it because this would definitely be in a good rewrite section where they could have written it more of an espionage type thing when it clearly is, because you have Zayhart basically acting as a double agent trying to find where the Gundam is, but you also get like the day-to-day things of the colonies. And after their president or their world leader was found to be you know a UE enthusiast or something like that. But just one thing, one trope that that they had played with fairly well, in my opinion, is in any conflicts amongst the colonies in any other Gundam stuff, it's always the people in space are trying to blow up the Earth so that there can be like more people in space. This was the first time that we've seen the people who lived in space trying to get to Earth because Earth is like it's sort of like that Battlestar Galactica feeling, where it's like if they can get back to Earth, then everything would be better. Everything will be okay. They'll be able to get the medicine that they need. They'll be able to get the food that they need, right? Which is also kind of weird because they are so high, they're so far in advanced technologically, but their healthcare is not up to par. So I would say like it's a interesting trope that they do with the Gundam mythos on to that end. But we had mentioned earlier that they could have reallocated the time a little bit between the three generations a little bit more. Do you believe that this is a drawback or a failure in the franchise that really hinders it in telling its story?
That is the number one thing that I would point to after finishing like all 49 episodes. Again, I say proudly, I guess, that the idea of this four arc setup to a season feels oddly paced in that you only get, well, the breakdown is 1 through 15 is Flint's, 16 through 28 is Asamu, 29 through 39 is Kyo, and then the last 9 episodes is like the family affair kind of meetup resolution to their three generational trauma. And then that's just not enough time to really care too much about your protagonist. And like, of course, like, because they come back as older versions of themselves, you still see them. But again, one of the selling points I think Ellis brought up was that you see the fallout of events in the Gundam universe, and that it's not given too much focus when you break up this one series that way. So again, like the main drawback to this is that maybe it should have just been a father-son story, not a father-son grandson story, or even just extended. But given that the reception of Gundam Age was kind of below expectations, that it does feel that the series is cut short. I think there was another Gundam series that was cut short like this. I think it was the original one.
F91 did that too, because F91 originally was going to be a standard 50 episode series, and it got cut down to a movie.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. But yeah, so it is a case of feeling very rushed at the end, oddly paced in certain spots. I'm not saying it's bad writing. It just feels like whatever the writer's room for the series was, is that they were maybe given assurances that something was going to happen, or a certain episode length, or maybe even a follow-up season. But it just feels that the major downside to, or the drawback to the series, is that we don't really get a too personal look at each of the main characters in their youth or in what they're going through. It's like more of a family dynamic, and it's kind of works, but it also kind of doesn't work for that reason.
I agree with that. I felt like, and I feel like they repeated that same problem in each of the arcs. Like, I feel like there's spacing at the beginning of it where for the first arc, the Flittigs, for example, he's going at the beginning. He's just learning how to pilot the Gundam. It's almost like an episode is the following day, and then it's like each episode is a day for him. It feels that way. And like when he goes and in the first few episodes, he gets the two warring mafia groups kind of to join forces. After that point, it feels like the entire first arc is just super rushed. Like it feels very rushed, and I feel like it does the same thing in each of the arcs. Like I feel like the pacing is like, it's almost like they go, okay, we're starting a Gundam series. Oh no, we're at the end. We need to wrap everything up. Okay, we're doing the next arc, and then they repeat the same mistakes over again. It sort of reminds me of the John Mulaney joke about writing "Happy Birthday" on a banner, where
giant H.
Yeah, where you giant H, and then you got to compress the rest of it.
No, I definitely I agree with you guys that like it seems like a stop go where you have a pseudo good introduction to the character, and then next thing you know, story stuff happens, and you're not giving a good enough time with the characters so for them to properly process this, and you do get excited because you see the characters older, but you don't have the same amount of time that to see your characters grow up to that point. So I guess like another question that would come from this is Ellis, are you familiar? Jay, don't get mad at me when I ask this, but Ellis, are you familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure franchise or no?
Not really, no.
Long and short of it, it works very similar in the age with Gundam Age in the sense that like it follows a family line, right? And essentially,
right, like each person gets like an entire season though, right?
Exactly. Like they like each person like the amount of content that they have, it can essentially be a standalone series in itself, and they call them like different parts. So, do you feel as though that Age would have benefited greatly if they had done something in regards to that? Whereas, like each age or each age generation could have gotten their own quote unquote season or franchise to keep the story generationally.
I kind of think they should have maybe done like they did with Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny, in that they could have had the Kyo that could have 25 episodes, Asano could have 25 episodes. I think they should have done it that way, and then like left it on a cliffhanger of when Asano is killed, and then brought back in like years later with Kyo and stuff like that for like a second season.
So like you would still give Flint like the first like 13 episodes just because you don't like him?
Well, I would actually, I'm actually thinking that had he been more fleshed out and not rushed, I would have liked him more. So I think if you had given, honestly, I would have given more time. I would have done each arc is 25.
Okay. So that's what you mean. Jay, you were about to say something.
Yeah, so I forgot. Yeah, in my explanation, I wanted to say this is that to parallel it to Star Wars, I feel like it is a case of that the third and fourth arcs actually do kind of do a disservice to the first half of the series. So yes, it is rushed. Yes, it's oddly paced or unevenly paced. Yes, you don't get a good attachment to each of the characters. But leaving the first season, so like the 28 episodes with Asumu's death, is feels like a natural stopping point. So like letting that be the first season and then having a whole another second season dedicated to basically what Ella said. But I very much enjoy that in the same way as The Last Jedi for the Star Wars movies does feel like a natural conclusion. Is that I don't need Kyo's story. I don't need their family resolution. I don't need to know what happened with they're not vegans, but the Vagons. But yeah, it does. I think it does work that if you just stop after episode 28, Gundam Age is a decent series.
That's a very interesting take on that. If you just
Maybe
end
we
it right there.
should have just got more space pirate adventures.
Oh well, to mention that because there is like side stories. There's like mangas. There's like video games, and we didn't even talk about the video game because I actually played it back when in the day. Actually, yeah, played the video game. Didn't watch the series because like
Oh, you did?
because Gundam Age is in the fighting game. I think it's Universal Cosmos or Cosmos Drive, but the Gundam battling game. So, anyways, yeah. So, yeah, there's a bunch of side stories to this. So there is like focus on Captain Ash and what he was doing in his intervening years of being missing. So, it was popular enough to warrant a manga or two mangas and two side stories. So, its popularity that wise is, existing.
No, that's fair. It seems like the answer is either leave it, either cut it short or just give us more space pirates. um, but since we've done nothing but like I guess like look on things that the show could have done to improve upon, is there anything? Is there something that it does very well that's a good selling point for and trying to get somebody to watch this franchise? Let's start with Ellis.
Well, yeah, it does. The designs are, and this happens, I feel like, with a lot of Gundam series that maybe don't do as well or aren't as well received rather. The reception's not as great. The Gundam designs themselves are top notch. And I feel that way with the UE as well. That it was such a departure from like the standard, Gundam antagonist suit designs. It was that it worked extremely well. I feel that that's new. I feel that what they did with the UE having more X rounder technology and being so far advanced, I like that. I think that, and as far as production goes, I think the animation itself holds up pretty well. But yeah, I think they did those very well. But part of me didn't like the difference between the designs for the mass production grunt suits. Like all the UE suits look, I mean, it goes with the theme, but I thought that the designs for the Federation stuff fell short, while the UE stuff was exceptional.
Oh yeah, no, I think it because the grunt suits were Adele's. Were they called?
In Genoases, yeah,
Genoases, yeah. And
Adele's Genoases, and
I think Jay might have mentioned it earlier, but like they just essentially look like toys compared to the UE's, even just like the UE's bare bones mobile suit. It looks frightening and imposing. And
right,
it's like you want to go and fight this dragon-looking thing in this suit that looks like it's 10-ply soft. It's crazy. Um, are there any other points that you would like to that you could think of, Ellis?
I think they tried to do a lot of different things with this, and for that I applaud them. But I feel like it may not have come to the mark that they were hoping it would have.
No, that's fair. Like it seems like they might have bit off a bit more than they could chew, but they at least attempted it.
Right, and for that I have to give them credit.
Most definitely. What about you, Jay?
I would just be echoing everything Ellis just said, because we talked about how our favorite designs were from the EU mobile suits. So that, and the music, we forgot, I didn't mention anything about the music, but the music's outstanding. We say that with a lot of Gundam series because Haruyuki Sawano did the music for Gundam Unicorn, and that's kind of the standard that Sunrise does for the Gundam series. They always go above and beyond with their music design, and not manipulation, but their sound design. So that's another point that I want to say, like, is top notch, or not top notch, but it does meet the standard of excellence for Sunrise properties.
Ellis, you were about to say something about the sound design as well.
Well, I was just agreeing with it being that, like, yeah, the soundtrack's always fantastic. If a Gundam series, if 90% of their soundtrack isn't bangers, something's wrong.
It's like it's not a good. It sort of reminds me of the Sonic game franchises. It's like even though the game may be crap, the music is at least on point. And if the music's not on point, that the fans don't consider it a Sonic game. So are you saying that that Gundam's sort of in that same light, where like
100%, 100%. All their soundtracks are great. And that, not to go too far off topic, but that 100% comes to a head in Thunderbolt.
I've heard good things about it. I've been meaning to watch it too, and just to sort of bring it back, like what Jay was saying in terms of the music. When he brought it up, the only thing that I can think of is the fanfare that they played every time young Flint comes on the screen and he's doing something heroic. It's just in your face, and it's like, oh, this is a heroic moment. I need to pay attention. That sort of thing. I don't really. Did they play the same music for Asimo as well, or was it a different theme for him?
I feel like they all got their own themes.
Because I just remember Flint's being in your face and being there. I guess just because of how his personality is. Let me see. Is there Jay? I think did, I think you had mentioned earlier that there was some things that you had wanted to mention. Did we hit some of your points that you wanted to talk about, or was there anything in particular that you wanted to mention?
We hit them all. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to the Star Wars comparison because of the space opera nature of the story, especially with the multi-generational kind of breakdown of war. So I just like that parallel to be made between this and Star Wars with the Skywalker family.
Now what we can do is go to the end-all question that I'm sure everybody is waiting for, on whether or not to resurrect or rebury the Gundam Age property and franchise. So, Ellis, we can start out with you. If, resurrection meaning that you would recommend the show to somebody, and you'll know that they'll enjoy it, or would you rebury Gundam Age, making nobody get any exposure from it at all?
Resurrect with an asterisk. The asterisk is if you can pass the first arc, it's worth a watch. If you can't get I think everything, which that's sort of weird because it goes into arcs, but the first arc is definitely the lowest point in the series, which is unfortunate because that's supposed to be how you get people into the series. So I think that if it's someone who is familiar with the Gundam as a franchise, 100% resurrect it. If it's someone who's brand new to Gundam or who's never seen a Gundam, don't even mention it.
Oh, so even among Gundam fans, you would still recommend this for them to watch. Why is that?
Right, but well, because because if they are Gundam fans, this has a little bit of differences to the rest of the franchise that and things that we don't see standard in the standard franchise. Things we don't see how, with the exception of Universal Century, but we don't see how how war affects the future. We don't see that. We saw like, oh, the war ends and everything's gonna be great, but we don't see the after effects. With Gundam Age, you do, because you see what happens in between. You see what happens generationally, and the only time that we get that same level of what caused this or how did X affect the future is Universal Century, and you have to go through the different series to find that.
Yeah, you sort of have to hunt and peck and do homework, whereas with Gundam Age, it shows you, and that's more or less the point of the show.
Right. It's one package instead of having to go watch 6 different series.
Oh, that's I didn't think about it in terms of like that before. I really appreciate that. Now, Jay, what about you? What's your decision? Do you resurrect or rebury?
So I'm going to repeat everything Ellis just said again, because apparently we're just on the same wavelength about this. But I'm going to say that it is a rebury with the asterisk for me, because there is something oddly disturbing about the series that I don't think we've really talked about, is the whole chibi design of their characters. And I just mean, like, it's not moe essentially, because it's not like shoujo ai or anything like Keion or Nichijou, but it is so kidified yet so dark and gritty in places that there is some kind of aesthetic
disconnect.
Yeah, disconnect that it just leaves me very disturbed after watching all 49 episodes. Again, I'm bragging, but it is a thing of everything that we mentioned, like the positives and negatives. But when you put it in the context of, if this is going to subvert again something I'm watching seasonally, then it isn't, because I've already did that with Gundam Unicorn. I just did it recently with Sacred 7, even though Gundam and Sacred 7 aren't the same thing. But it's the idea of, what is the story doing that I need to see? And I think when we talk more about the decline of mecha in the 2010s, this is just an example of Sunrise limping to the barn or beating a dead horse to meat and trying to sell it to the masses. And it's so weird that this series is overlooked compared to Seed and Gundam Destiny, or Seed Destiny. And then there was another one in this time frame.
W.o.W, I think.
W.o.W, yeah. And those are so beloved, and this one is just like forgotten for, I think, that reason. So it's probably a thing of marketing. It's probably a thing of poor timing, and all that. I'm just going to say that it's a reburied, because IBO, I just learned what that is, comes up right after this or follows this. So that's the series I would say like needs to be rewatched nowadays. But this can be forgotten, so I'm going to rebury it.
This was unfortunate in where it was placed in the Gundam mythos, because it was sandwiched between W.o.W and IBO, which is not a good place to be unless you're bringing your A game.
Wait, now that I think about it, I think there was another franchise that Jay was talking about, G Reconquista. Do you remember that one?
I do.
Was that one before this one or after? Because I know it was a little bit before IBO.
It was before IBO, and what Reconquista and G, if I remember correctly, and somebody please fact check me, I think it got canceled. Like, yeah, I want to say it did. They took it off the air before it was fully finished, I want to say, but I know they finished it. They do have the episodes finished, yeah.
Yeah, it was canceled like mid-broadcasting schedule, and it's available places, but yeah, again, it's like, it's in the same camp of this. It's just like poorly timed and poorly placed.
Okay, no, that's fair. And I'm sort of on the fence now, because I was going to resurrect it a lot because of like the mecha designs, and I had fun building the Gunpla, and I sort of liked the character design as well, and I do see it being a little bit menacing, Jay, but like it doesn't bother me to that extent as it bothered you. And I also liked how they had attempted the three generation story, like the overarching story, trying to show the impact of war. But I also understand your points too, so I'm sort of like on the fence of reburying it too. I think that like despite its faults, it's still a good. I still think it's a good fun watch, even if you maybe stop watching it to where like as you had mentioned earlier, when Asimo is assumed dead, you could like stop there, or you can watch the whole series in its entirety. And I remember when I watched it, like I even though it was a bit of a mess, but like near the end it felt like the story was completed to a degree, and at least like it was like a fun time. It's not going to be like a hallmark or a staple in the Gundam franchise like IBO or Double O, but it's still at least like a decent watch, and I would at least like give them kudos for attempting to do that. And I feel as though like if it's brought back, then somebody can try to take that multi-generational story aspect and try to tell it in a better way. But aside from that, Ellis, do you have any closing remarks that you would like to make?
Well, not in regards to age, but it has to. I do have a remark to be made on about a previous podcast I listened to. Sam, you can skip Gundam Zeta. I'm sorry. What? um, how how do how do you skip Gundam Zeta?
Just like I did and look up Wikipedia. I'll watch it.
Well, it shows Armoro and Char working together, and both of them sort of leading the new Gundam pilots, in the direction. It it shows sort of it shows more of the disparity that the space noids are living in
Okay.
than the original series does, and it sort of and Char's speech in Dakar is one of my hallmark anime moments of all time. Just his speech is a defining moment in the Gundam mythos, like of um how he goes to and to have this speech in the way he does to try to appeal to the people of Earth, to show the people of Earth what's actually happening, what the Federation is actually doing to the people out in space.
So totally skippable. Okay.
It has no emotional merit. It has nothing on the Gundam franchise at all. No. It definitely. I was not aware that there was such a good moment like that in there, and it's funny because it sort of reminds me of the show The Expanse a little bit, where it's just talking about like the disparity between the people who live out in space versus those who live on Earth or on Mars. So it definitely does sound good, and I would like to definitely go back and watch Zeta. To do you proud, Ellis, and to uh, to definitely experience that, because Shar was always a good orator, and so like the fact that like he had a speech where he addressed the people of Earth to essentially tell them about the colony's situation. That will be very interesting.
And as it definitely ties into what's happening now in the Gundam mythos, because it sets up Char's counterattack. Like it doesn't set up double Zeta, even though they happen within days of each other, but it sets up Char's counterattack, and Char's counterattack sets up Hathaway, which Hathaway, is the new thing. So it definitely is relevant to current Gundam.
Okay, no, and I did watch Char's counterattack per your suggestion, and it did help me understand Hathaway so much more. than I had if I had gone into Hathaway blind. So I definitely want to go back and check out Zeta Gundam now to see the connecting dots, the connecting lines, things of that nature. Um, so that's our thoughts on Gundam Age. We have a resurrect from myself and from Ellis. Resurrect with an asterisk from Ellis, and we also have a rebury from Jay with an asterisk on the rebury. Surprise! 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 Not surprised. So yeah, that's been our podcast. Thank you, Ellis, for joining us today. You've
Anytime.
been a pleasure. Is there anything that you would like to say before we go to Jay for our closing remarks?
Well, thank you guys for having me. I definitely enjoyed it. This was, having to getting to have an in-depth Gundam conversation and in-depth discussion about the different tropes and just everything that we talked about today is not something I get a whole lot, so I really appreciated it.
No worries, no worries. It's always good to inject some Gundam and to have some quality time with our friends.
It definitely does.
All right, Jay, do we have any last words from you?
I'm glad you asked that because I wanted to take this time to explain my evil plan.
Okay.